Hello everyone and welcome to this month's Masterclass, which is all about when you should follow the guideline 8 ever, 9 never. Now if you've never heard of this guideline before, I am going to run through it, so don't panic, but I expect that most of you will have come across this at some point. So what is it? What does it mean, 8 ever, 9 never? Well, it's always about suit combinations where you have the ace, the king and the jack of a suit, but you're missing the queen. And in those cases, there are two options for how you might capture this queen. The first one is taking a finesse. Now think back to last month's masterclass, we were taking finesses there as well, and we were playing towards a tennis. In this case, that will be ace-jack or king-jack, and you try putting in the jack, hoping that the person to the left of the jack is the person who holds the queen. And that way your jack will win the trick. The other option is to play for the drop, which means you cash both of the higher honours, the ace and the king, and you hope that the queen falls, singleton or doubleton. Now the way we use 8 ever, 9 never is it's just a bit of a mnemonic, alliterative, we like those kind of things, to remember which of those lines is more likely to work. And it's playing on the knowledge that the longer a suit, the more cards you have in the suit, and therefore the fewer that the opponents have, the more likely it is that the queen is going to be in short holding. So that means that in this case, 8 ever, 9 never, you are always taking the finesse. That's what the ever refers to. So that's saying if you have 8 or fewer cards in the suit, you should finesse. And consequently, if you have 9 or more cards in the suit, you should not finesse. You should play for the drop, and that's where the never comes from. Now, there needs to be a bit of a clarification here because I see lots of people getting confused with this. And that is that this guideline is not just saying how you should play combinations where you have 8 or combinations where you have 9. It's telling you at what point the probabilities tip in favour of the other play. So as the suit gets longer, at what point do the probabilities tip in favour of playing for the drop? And as the suit gets shorter, at what point does it tip into finessing? So it doesn't mean that you finesse with 8 and you play for the drop with 9 and you just don't know what to do if you have any other number of cards. It's saying that, say these are the lengths of the suit, here is the tipping point between 8 and 9, and at that point 8 or fewer you take the finesse and 9 or more you play for the drop. Now this hopefully should be somewhat intuitive once you look at some examples. So in the first example we have 5 cards in the suit, ace, king, jack in one hand and a couple of low ones in the other. And in the second example we have a whopping 11 card holding in this suit with 6 opposite, ace, king, jack over there, and 5 little ones in our hand. So in the first example, the opponents have 8 cards in the suit, so it's really unlikely that this queen is going to be short. If someone's got a singleton or a doubleton, then that means that someone has, 6 or 7 cards in the suit, which is fairly unlikely if if you're working on an assumption that normally people tend to mention these things, or even if they don't, it's harder to get dealt those. So in that case, you should finesse because it's very unlikely that playing ace-king is just going to work. In the second example, this is a really nice example, nice and clear cut. There's no way you should take the finesse because it's 100% that the queen will be short. The opponents only have 2 cards in the suit, so if you play 2 rounds, it doesn't matter how badly they break, both of them will always fall. So you should definitely play for the drop. So let's look into why this is the case. So we talked about the intuitions here, with longer suits being more likely to favour a drop. But why should you take a finesse when you have 8 cards in the suit? So look at this example. We've got 8 cards, we've got ace, king, jack opposite. If the suit is 3-2, which is the most likely break, you don't have to lose a trick at all if you correctly guess how to capture the queen. So here are our 2 options again, which we're getting used to now. There are 2 possible opponents who might hold the queen. It's either your left-hand opponent or your right-hand opponent. So if you're hoping specifically that your left-hand opponent holds it, it's 1 out of 2, which, as we all know, don't have to be a maths whiz to know that's 50%. However, playing for the drop, there are 3 possible slots for the queen in 3 card holding. So remember, we're making an assumption that the suit is 3-2, because otherwise, we're always going to lose a trick in the suit. In the 3 card holding, the queen could be in the first slot, the second slot, or the third slot. In the 2 card holding, it could only be in the first slot or the second slot. So out of those 5 cards that the opponents have, it's only 2 in 5 that the queen is going to be in a doubleton. And that's only 40%. So therefore, finessing is very definitely better than playing for the drop. So why should you play for the drop when you have 9 cards in the suit? So now we've got this example in front of us. If the suit is 2-2, which is a 40% possibility, or it's 3-1, which is, it will be 50% of the time, then you don't have to lose a trick if you correctly guess how to capture the queen. So we're ignoring 4-1 because then we have to lose a trick. Sorry, 4-0, not 4-1. So in this case, you need to remember that you're going to start out by cashing one of the big honours, no matter what you plan to do next. So this follows on directly from the previous month's masterclass, where we were deciding when we're going to be cashing one of these big honours. Absolutely no reason not to do it. In this suit combination, you can cash your ace, as is shown here, and now you can play the 4. So we play our 4, that turns blue, and then we get to decide what to do when we get to the other hand. Now, if your left-hand opponent follows low, which is sadly often the case, you have to decide what to do. You have to decide whether to play the king next or play the jack to take a finesse. So it seems a bit strange here because we've already said that 3-1 is a more likely split than 2-2. So surely that means that we should take the 50% chance rather than the 40% chance. Why is it 9 never? So here is our scenario. We've seen the 10 and the 9 on our left, and we've seen the 8 on our right. But the queen could be in either hand, we don't know which. Could be on the left, could be on the right. However, this is not a 50% chance. Our left-hand opponent has 11 cards that we haven't seen. We've only seen the 10 and the 9 in this instance. However, our right-hand opponent has 12 cards that we haven't seen. So out of all of these unseen cards, 23 unseen cards, the chance that the queen is on our left is 11 out of 23, whereas the chance that it's on our right is 12 out of 23. So it's very slightly more likely to be in our right-hand opponent's hand than our left-hand opponent's hand. And therefore the finesse is less likely to work. Play for the drop. Let's do a summary here because the 9 never is a little bit hard to visualize sometimes. Here are our 2 options. Left-hand opponent only has 11 possible spaces for the queen. These are called vacant spaces, spaces where you haven't seen a card already. That's 11 out of 23, which is about 48%. Playing for the drop, right-hand opponent has 12 spaces available for the queen. 12 out of 23 is about 52%. So you can see it's very close, but it's definitely better to play for the drop. So that's where the 9 never comes from. However, 9 never is an extremely misleading thing to rely on, because it makes it sound like a blanket rule. You know, you never take the finesse, but as we've seen, it's actually quite close. So these probabilities are truly based on not having any prior knowledge about the hand. And as you know, in bridge, we're getting clues all the time, so we need to be able to factor in these clues as well. So there are some times where it's not right to follow 8 ever, 9 never, and we're going to look at those now. So the first thing to do is to think about the distribution. That's the biggest clue that we have. When we don't have any information about the hand that's going to be any use, then we can just follow 8 ever, 9 never and not worry about it. When we have information, we need to be able to factor that in. And we need to be able to think about whether that's going to be enough to sway us away from this guideline that we're following. Note that I'm calling it a guideline, not a rule, as most things are in bridge, I'm afraid, apart from you must follow suit and other similarly boring things. 9 never is reliant on a vacant space difference. That's a reminder, difference in the number of cards that you don't know about. Vacant space difference of only 1 card. Remember, 11 out of 23 compared to 12 out of 23. So it's not a huge difference. That means that if the distribution information means that there's an extra 1 card of difference swaying you the other way, then that means it's not enough to make the finesse more likely. Pretty even between the two lines, because it's going to be 12 and 12 in that case. Sorry, 11 and 11 in that case. That means that it's going to be 11 and 11 in that case. Whereas a 2-card difference is enough to make the finesse more likely because it tips it the other way, so that one hand only has 10 vacant spaces and the other one has 11, for example. It means that one hand has 10 vacant spaces and the other one has 12. It means that one hand has 9 vacant spaces and the other one has 11. So let's look at this distribution information in light of an example. So here's our example from before. This time we've named the suit as diamonds and we have some information. So in the first example, we have information that our left-hand opponent has 4 spades and our right-hand opponent has 5 spades. This is not a big enough difference to sway us away from 9 never, even though we know about 6 cards in our right-hand opponent's hand. We also know about 6 cards in our left-hand opponent's hand because we've seen them follow again to the second round of the suit. So that's not enough to say we should definitely take the finesse now. It just means that they're equally likely to work. As a piece of advice, I would say that if you think you want to go safe on the hand, generally people are going to be more likely to be playing for the drop because they'll be following 9 never. So if you think safety is the aim on the hand, then try to do what the field is doing and play for the drop. But it's nothing to do with probabilities at that stage. However, another example. On this one, once again, we know that left-hand opponent has 4 spades, and we know that right-hand opponent has 5 of them. We also know that left-hand opponent has 3 hearts, and right-hand opponent has 4. So now we know that left-hand opponent has 7 major suit cards, and right-hand opponent has 9. That's a difference of 2. So it's enough to sway 9 never in favour of the finesse. So how do we gather these clues? Now we know what to do with them. They can come from a number of sources. The bidding, of course. The lead, don't forget about that one. Showing out, it will sort of reveal itself, or will it? And counting high call points. So let's look at some examples of each of these in turn and how you might gather these clues. Talk about the bidding first. In this auction, we've opened a heart, 1 spade overcall, 2 hearts support from partner, 2 spades support on our right, and then we bid 4 hearts and we were allowed to stay there. When we get a chance to look at the dummy, we will know how many spades the opponents hold between them. At the moment we don't know, but we will see when we see the dummy, because we'll know, oh, we have 4 or we have 5. The opponents have the rest. If it turns out that the opponents have 8 spades between them, then you're going to know how they divide. You know that left-hand opponent has 5 and right-hand opponent has 3, because left-hand opponent had to have 5 to make an overcall on the hand. If they had 9, it is a bit more likely that left-hand opponent has 6 and right-hand opponent has 3, because generally people raise preemptively, so right-hand opponent would jump to 3 most of the time when they have 4 card support. However, if right-hand opponent turns out to be very balanced, they might only choose to bid 2 spades because they might be a little bit worried about maybe vulnerability or being doubled or something else. So in that case, it's still possible that they might be 5-4. Clues from the lead. How do we think about those? How do we wheedle those out? So in this first example, we see our left-hand opponent lead the 9 of a suit, and we need to remember that that shows a singleton or a doubleton. If we are missing 7 cards in that suit, that means that our right-hand opponent is holding 5 or 6 of them. So that's a huge difference in spaces. If we are missing 6 cards in the suit, then our right-hand opponent holds 4 or 5. Maybe if we have other information from the bidding as well, we'll be able to put these clues together. And so on. If we have 5, then we know that our right-hand opponent has 3 or 4. So it continues. If our left-hand opponent instead leads the 2 of a suit and it's the 4th highest lead, maybe you're playing in no trumps, or maybe your opponents do that all the time. You won't find that Arjun does, but if you're playing against human opponents who do this, then that means you can place the rest of the cards in the suit in right-hand opponent's hand, because the 2 is the lowest possible card. Nothing's going to be lower than that, so that's exactly a 4-card suit. If you are playing in a no-trump contract, then that usually means that left-hand opponent doesn't have another 5-card suit that they could have led, because usually people lead their longest suit against no trumps. Of course, there might be a bit of a freak scenario where their 5-card suit is one that's been bid, but nearly all the time it will mean that the 4-card suit is potentially accompanied by another 4-card suit, but never a 5-card suit. That means that if you're missing 9 cards in a different suit, maybe they led the wrong thing, this does happen, believe me, then right-hand opponent will have at least 5 of those, because left-hand opponent can't have 5 of them. So then maybe that will give you an extra clue about where those cards are as well. So maybe the lead doesn't necessarily just tell you about the lead in that suit, it tells you about the possible leads in the other suits that weren't made. So those are a little bit trickier. Showing out seems very obvious. Sometimes you just see your opponent show out early on, and then you know how that suit divides 100%, you've seen it happen. However, sometimes you need to think to look for the information yourself. and that means that you need to cash some winners in a different suit to see whether anyone shows out, to see how many rounds that they follow to place the cards in people's hand. And you don't always get a 100% clear picture. Maybe someone doesn't show out, but maybe that can be illuminating as well. This is called a discovery play, where you try to play some winners to work out what the distribution is to inform a different play. Bit of a caveat here, do be careful, don't get roughed, don't cash some winners and get yourself roughed, or if it's no trumps potentially, or can still be in a suit contract, but most commonly in no trumps, don't open up suits needlessly. Obviously it can be the right thing to do, but don't take unnecessary risks. Finally, clues from counting high card points. It's information that's all there, but sadly often forgotten about. In this first example, we have an opponent who passes instead of opening the bidding. That means that he can't have at least 12 points. If you see 10 points from that opponent, you know that he can't have the queen. So you can immediately place that missing queen in his partner's hand. However, if an opponent, in a different example, opens one no trump, and that shows 15 to 17, and then you and your partner bid a game, so you've got 25 points, that means that the person who opened one no trump has all of the points, and his partner can't have the queen. He's the one who's got the queen, the opening bidder. And that might affect the way you make a play, because you know for sure which opponent has the queen. So you're not going to take a finesse in that case if the person on your right has all the points. So with those things in mind, I would like you to head over to the tournament on Funbridge and try the practice hands, give them a go. You might find them a little bit tricky. I hope there'll be a bit of a mixture there, and see how you get on. And then you can watch the videos afterwards to see how they should have been played.